friends, it's Jen Quintana at Haleakala Healing Garden. I took a long time today to figure out what our topic was going to be for the Sunday talk, and I think it's going to be about past lives. So it occurs to me that a belief in past lives is pretty foundational to everything that I know and understand about the spiritual realm. And I guess it's not that everybody needs to believe in past lives, but to the degree that you're a spiritual seeker like I am and you are exploring that topic, I thought I would just take some time here to document kind of what I've learned about past lives, what I've learned about my own past lives, how I came to that wisdom, and just kind of everything I know about past lives and how to explore past lives. So I was pretty open to the idea of past lives, and with that openness, as I kind of started to explore spirituality many years ago, my son was in a Waldorf school, and I started looking into the teachings of Rudolf Steiner. And Rudolf Steiner believes in past lives and taught a lot about past lives. Which kind of was interesting to me because it was, Rudolf Steiner was a mystical Christian philosopher, and most past lives teachings come from Eastern belief systems. And I had been raised Christian, so definitely past lives wasn't something that I had been taught about before, and then to find a Christian teacher who believed in past lives was interesting to me. Anyways, long story short, I've been open-minded about it. I read a lot about it. I learned, a lot of different philosophies about it. I kept an open mind about it. And then I had my own experience of finding out about one of my own past lives first. And then over the years, as I kind of get more into alignment and more in tune with who I am on a soul level, other past lives have popped into my consciousness, and I've met other people who have awareness of their past lives. And then I've been able to investigate my daughter's past life and other people who I come into contact with. I've also started to recognize when I have soul recognition of someone who I've had a past life connection with. So I get I get a feeling right away about that person that I have a past life connection with them. So it's sometimes not right away. Actually, sometimes it's right away, but sometimes I can be friends with somebody for a while and then I get the ding that I have a past life connection with them. So now I just know if I have that feeling, I know what it is. I don't misinterpret it. For a while, I was not understanding what that feeling was about. And I just check in with a psychic. I have a friend who's a psychic. I call her, and I just ask her, like, what was our past life connection? And she'll lean into it and tell me, and that's really helpful for me to understand the energy behind my meeting that person again in this lifetime. So usually people we meet in past lives will have a karmic connection with. So that was a long introduction to say we're talking about past lives. I think I want to break it into 3 segments. So one is my experience finding my first past life. I also want to talk about what Rudolf Steiner says about past lives and some of the nuances about how long you have between lives and things like that. Maybe I'll talk about that first. I'll talk about my first time figuring out about one of my past lives, and then I'll just talk about the implications of understanding that we have past lives and how that kind of should change how we live our current life. So let's go there. Rudolf Steiner said that we have past lives, many past lives. He also supported an inquiry into a scientific inquiry into astrology, which was called astrosophy. And it has the word astrosophia in the word astrosophy. So it's a version of astrology. Sophia is the name for wisdom that is backed by Steiner's principles and beliefs. And there are many astrosophers who run charts in a way that was prescribed by another person who studied Steiner, but who really founded astrosophy. And I've worked with one of those people. And I've worked with one of those people, an astrosopher named Brian Gray. He may still have out on YouTube somewhere. He had a lot of classes that he taught at Rudolf Steiner College that he recorded, which are really, if you're an astrologer, it's really fun to watch because it's a different way of looking and interpreting a chart. I think all ways of interpreting astrological charts are just different lenses, different viewpoints into the same information, and it's really helpful to look at astrology charts from many different perspectives. You get a fuller picture. So in that philosophy of astrosophy that came out of Steiner's teachings, what is understood is that the day you died in your past life, the date, so like if it was April 10th in your past life, that was your death date, that date becomes your birth date in your current lifetime. And it gets all sort of complicated when there's calendar changes. So like Russian calendars before 1800 something, there was a different calendar. So sometimes you have to do some little calculations to figure that out. But basically, anybody born in the common calendar, it's pretty easy to find out. We're now over 100 years into the common calendar, so it's not too challenging. I think we're almost like 200 years in the common calendar in this country. So my first past lifetime that I was able to figure out, one of the clues that I was able to land on was that my death date is my birth date in this lifetime, so that was helpful. The other thing is that I've come to realize by tracking several of my own past lifetimes and past lifetimes for others, that the shortest I've seen anybody reincarnate is like 50 years. So there tends to be 50 to 70 years between lifetimes, and it can be longer. So I know like my last past life, I died in 1836, and then I was reborn in 1972. So somehow I skipped a lifetime. I stayed out a really long time. I'm not really sure why that happens. I have a couple of theories. But it may be that I chose not to incarnate in one lifetime and I was waiting for my soul partner. Maybe I was walking as a spirit guide during that lifetime rather than being incarnated. It could also be that I spent a long time on Earth, kind of earthbound, before I crossed over, which prevented me from being reincarnated timely. So that's just something that's interesting to note. There are many people that astrosophers have tracked through their astrology charts to say that this person was reincarnated again at this time when the planets were aligned, and you can see people through their astrology charts. So I think Sir Francis Bacon is believed to be the reincarnation of the Apostle John Peter, I think. So there's some interesting nuances like that you can follow through time. So how it came to be that I found out about my first past life. I was having an experience where I was experiencing a lot of migraines and back pain, and I started seeing a chiropractor in Los Angeles about it. And she was asking me a lot of questions, like, have you had any accidents? Do you have any accidents as a child? All these different things. And I was like, nothing. There was nothing that explained the extreme back pain that I was in. And then I kismetly, as you put the question out to the universe tries to answer it for you. I came across this article that was talking about cellular memory, and I realized that my body is holding some information that can help untangle what the pain is about. So I had, my husband at the time is very psychic. I had him put his hands on my back, and he didn't really believe he was psychic, but I knew he was, and my psychic said he was. So I asked him just to put his hands on my back and tell me what came into his consciousness. And he played along, and he said, actually, there's this whole scene unfolding in my mind right now. And he started telling me about the scene, and he's like, it's in New York, it's springtime, there's still some snow on the ground, and it's, he's like, it's like 1800s. And I started asking him questions. I'm like, well, is it this, is it that? And then the answers were coming to him through my asking him questions. And then he started telling me, like, well, you were a prostitute. He's like, you've been stabbed in the back. And this whole scene unfolded. And so that was it. And I took that information, I sat with it for a little while, and then I just had this awareness that I could find a record of this prostitute who was murdered in New York City in the 1830s. And I found her. I don't know how I knew I could find her or that anything would even be documented about her, but I did find documentation. And I thought, well, it's probably just another random prostitute who died in the 1830s. It's probably not who I was exactly, right? But then as I started reading more and more about her, I was having all these epiphanies as I was reading about her. Like things were just like coming into my awareness, and it was really interesting because I was reading about her and there were conclusions drawn about her life. And as I'm reading it, I just knew that that wasn't true, or that that was true, or that that wasn't true. And I was like, how do I know this? And then her death date matched my birth date. And so I was like, wow, right? And so I kept researching more and more about her life. I was able to get copies of letters that she had written to all these men that she had a relationship with. Back then, prostitution was legal. And she worked in a house that had, it was owned by a politician whose brother was vice president at the time, and she had written a lot of letters to these men that she would keep in contact with and who were traveling to Europe and back and forth from New York. New York was the center of politics at that time in the United States, and so a lot of the men that she had as clients were politically motivated or politically connected. And she also was a very prominent patron of the theater in New York City. Which is really interesting. It's almost like prostitutes at that time were like social media influencers of their day. There was a special seating arrangement for prostitutes in the theater because they would attract a lot of men to the theater. So it's kind of wild if you read about how prostitution was in New York in the 1830s. It's really different than how we think of prostitution today. She walked down Wall Street quite often to mail these letters to the men, and that was really interesting to me because I remember one time in New York City when I was on Wall Street, I was having this total weird experience, which I now understand is what happens when you're having like a kismet, I've been here before, past life experience. But I was having like a total awareness of having been there before and walking down that street, and it's almost like the city knew I was there. I talk to buildings sometimes too, but that's besides the point. I was one of my earliest experiences of having a very strong energetic experience of having been in a place before and feeling recognized by the place when I was there. And even though I didn't understand it at the time, I remember it being really profound. And then now having this past life of me in New York City come up, and then reading about how I would walk down Wall Street often, and I was known to wear this green dress. And anyways, I read the letters, and when I read the letters, it was like crazy because it's in a little bit of an old English style, but it was totally my voice. Like it was totally my writing style. And even though nothing about her life is similar to my life now, there was this thread that kept coming through of like, oh, that's my writing style, or the description of her bedroom on the police report when she died was exactly how I would keep my room. Like I had a sleigh bed, she had a sleigh bed, I had a stack of books on my nightstand, I have opera posters on the wall. Like it was wild to me, like what the things she kept around her in her space and how she kept her space was very similar to how I would keep my space. And there were just so many other kismet crazy things. Anyways, this past lifetime that I uncovered, it was not known who killed her. There was somebody who stood trial for her murder, and he was acquitted, and it was assumed that he was actually guilty but got away with it. But I knew he didn't do it, and I didn't know how I knew. The history didn't capture who did do it, and so it was really interesting for me to be standing in awareness that I was murdered in a past life. The person who was blamed was innocent. Fortunately, he got off. And I knew I had been framed. And so this whole line of inquiry, I thought, well, I'm the only one that knows who actually killed Helen. Her name was Helen. I'm the only one that knows who killed Helen because I was Helen. So I need to solve this. So I went into this contemplation for like 2 weeks where I just repeated to myself over and over again whenever I caught myself thinking, who killed Helen? Who killed Helen? Who killed Helen? And I did eventually get the answer. And it was through this really crazy, mind-exploding way. And it was very wrapped up in the politics of the time. And it actually ties to some time forward. It sheds light on President Lincoln's assassination as well. So it's a lot. It's also really interesting to me that at the time when this was all unraveling for me, I started to recognize that I had an energetic connection to what was happening in U.S. politics in my personal life. Like similar, different things were happening, but they were energetically similar. And as things started to get real divisive after the 2016 election in American politics, I was noticing things were getting divisive in my life. And so it was like this really interesting correlation. And in Cards of Destiny, my birthday card is the same birthday card. It's shared with July 4th, which is the birthday of the country. So I have this interesting shared connection with the country. And then I was murdered in my past life by someone in politics. And then now I've uncovered some past lives even before that, where I was the mayor of Albany in the 1700s, and some of my children married into American political famous people. So there's some connection with my lineages with the American political life. So that's just something that I've been able to connect and interweave and understand a little bit by discovering this one past life. I've been able to discover several past lifetimes. Not all of them were in the United States. I think I have at least 2 that I'm aware of in the United States before this one. I also remember one in Germany, one in England, and one in France has come forward. I don't have active memories of that one, but I am planning a trip to Paris to see if I get that. I've been here before feeling. I've been to Paris once before, and it was very kismet, and a lot of crazy things happened on that trip, which in hindsight speaks to that, and I believe that'll happen again when I go there, so I'm looking forward to that. My kid's father, he was a race car driver in his past lifetime, and I was thinking he remembered how he died in his past life, and I was like, wow, the cars haven't been invented for that long. So it was in the really early days of cars, and we were able to search it out and find it. His middle name in this lifetime was his first name in his last lifetime, so that was interesting. There's always these connections with names and birth dates and things like that. My daughter, one of my daughters, I found her past lifetime. She's actually the most famous one of all of us, and so that's kind of been an interesting connection and really helped me understand her and kind of what she came from and what she was able to accomplish in her past life, and just really to know that I need to get out of her way. My other daughter, I haven't narrowed it down as precisely to a person yet, but we will get there. And I think more and more in the future, because everything is documented on the internet now, everybody's writing a book, everybody's on Facebook, everybody's birthdays are documented. We are going to be able to find our past life people a lot easier than how it is now trying to find people that lived in the 1800s or the 1700s. If you weren't really famous, there might not be documentation. So that's a little bit about past lifetimes. And I think it's really important that we understand that we have all these experiences, because sometimes in this lifetime we might not know why we had back pain. Well, then I found out I had a sword, like a knife in my dagger in my back. And then I did some work with healers, and I found I've been murdered in many past lifetimes, and I had many wounds that I was actually carrying in my cellular memory in a way. It's not like I had these exact same cells before, but there's some energetic thing of my soul in a body that remembers those injuries. And then also understanding like the gifts that we bring with us, and also the pain that we bring with us, and the karma that we bring with us, and the drama that we bring with us. I have a lot of repeating patterns in this lifetime that I've had to unwind. A lot of people that I have energetic cords with from that lifetime that I have to cut constantly. I meet a lot of people who I have known in a past life, and I knew a lot of people in that past lifetime. There's somebody that came to me through my counseling practice who we wanted to look into her past lifetime. She has a really interesting story. She had a lot of crazy things happen to her, and she's just such an outgoing and wild personality too, and she's just really always shows up for herself. But she had been put in these horrible situations that led her into a really downward spiral, and as she was coming out of that spiral, she was just really curious about herself, and I was curious about her too. And so we did some work with a psychic to get some clues as to who she was in her past lifetime. We did some research on the location where she lived, the time that it was, what her birthday is, what death dates were, who died on those days in that year, and we were able to find her past lifetime too. And so that really brought into, similar to my daughter, she's also has a well-known famous past life. And so it really brings forward like these people that we still to this day revere in some cases as being heroes that died, 50 years ago, 70 years ago. If they were reborn today into this world, how would we treat them? How would we treat, Elvis Presley if he was reincarnated? Would we put him on ADHD medication? Probably. So there's these things that just, it's so interesting, the things that come to light when you understand who someone is from a bigger perspective than just what you see in front of you right here. When you understand what they've accomplished and done and who they've been in a past life, you can really have a deeper appreciation for what they're calling into their life in this time, and also for the people who are trying to hold them back. So that's pretty profound, actually, when you are able to incorporate the wisdom of many lifetimes and someone's historical references from many lifetimes. You can understand their phobias, you can understand their likes and dislikes, you can understand a lot of things about a person by understanding that they've lived here before and that they chose the circumstances that they were born into in order to challenge them in some way or write some karma. I definitely have past life karma with my current parents, my mom specifically, and with my sister. I felt a past life connection with my brother. I haven't explored it too deeply. So there's just a lot that you can figure out and know, and sometimes we're here to heal ancestral trauma. So we're born into families that maybe wounded us in a past lifetime so that we can help them not do that again. So that's it. That's my talk on past lives. I have a lot of blog work on past lives. I talk a lot about when I was Helen in my blog, and I'm writing a book about it. I want to make it into a screenplay, and I get hung up on that because I've never written a screenplay, so I have to put some more thought into how that's going to come about. But it's a really interesting story, and I have a lot of insight on it, so I'd love to tell it someday. Have a beautiful Sunday. And if you need help figuring out your past life, I've done it now for many people and myself, and it's really fun work, and it's really enlightening, and it really tells you a lot about yourself. So I highly recommend it. Have a beautiful Sunday. If you like this channel and you'd like to learn more about using our platform and channel for your content, please visit the woowowellness.com website, go to Benefits for Healers, and you can leave your information to become a Woo Woo Wellness healer and be supported by Woo Woo Wellness.